I'm going to present the use of sensitivity analysis in the assessment of adaptive capacity to climate change, case to a study from Brazil that was carried out by Drs. Donald Nelson and Dr. Hallie Eakin, and that I developed with my colleagues Ileana and Alejandra Estrada-Barón. The important thing that we got to convey is that the problem Dr. Nelson and Dr. Eakin were studying is what they carry out a survey of household adapted capacity to food insecurity in the state of Brazil in 1988, and that they repeated that study 10 years later. So I'm gonna see what lessons can be learned and the use of the ISAHP and sensitivity analysis in that respect. So we draw from Trantafula Sanchez sensitivity analysis to identify the most critical indicators, but because in this case the interest was to check to assess what the change between the two surveys with the distance. And we use two types of tests, indicator removal and threshold value. And this was the context of a program for fighting poverty in the state of Ceará in Brazil. So it was very important to check what changed between 1998 and 2012. And this is the state of Ceará in Brazil. So the two ISAHP, we developed two ISAHP models with our colleagues. The one in 1988 had this indicator that you're looking at, and in the later survey there was one indicator that was not assessed, which was already planted. So these are government interventions, each of these ones. So we developed the surveys, and for each indicator, each household, we developed a value function. Well, value function is a transformation from the natural scale of the indicator to a value from the ideal state, the best condition for that criteria, to the anti-ideal. And we just a linear combination to obtain a vulnerability value for each household. Okay, the indicator removal step is very simple. You just, according to this equation, you just take the overall value of your vulnerability index, and then you remove one indicator by one, and you see how much each what's the effect of that indicator in the value. The interesting thing that with the land reversals we measured that we used was compared with the median value of vulnerability for all the values. So we're not our alternatives were the households, but we didn't. It is not of our interest to see if one specific household was changing rank with respect to other households, but to the overall assessment. And the second, well, and I do have this concept of land reversal that is obtained over here. The important thing is that we had to check for the probability of the land reversal. It was very important. Let's see what's the other one. These are the criteria for the swaps, and the thing on so the first test, the indicator removal, give us an idea of the importance of the relative of the state of each indicator. Whereas the second one, the threshold value test from Trantafula, gives us somewhat a similar value, but with respect to the sorry, this gives us, with respect to the standardized score of each state. So what you take is the difference between the two values, the reference value and the value of each household, and you divide it by the weight. And you have a measurement of the, if the value is feasible or not. Well, and then you obtain the reciprocal, just to make it a easier to understand, because in this case, the higher the sensitivity, the higher the value of phase, the more sensitive is the score. Okay, and let's go to the results. And these are the values of the different indicators for the survey 1998 in 2012, and you can see that they differ between the two. For example, per capita income, this was the spread of the values, is the box plot for 1988, that you have these values in 2012. Or agricultural assets changes also quite a bit. And or for example, some criteria or indicators that were not measured in one survey were measured in the second one. So the standardized scores of the results for each household actually changed between 1998 to 2012. So this would give us the idea that it was some improvement given the government interventions in terms of the adaptive capacity of the households. And when we do the indicator removal test, what we can see is that the main factors that could explain those results were credit for 2010. So households had a lot more access to credit, or easy access to credit in the second survey than in 1998. But education of adults was more important, and non-ownership was more important than in the 1988 and 2012. When we test or review this sensitivity coefficient for the land reversals, what we can see is that two things. In this case, let's check for livestock assets, the number of heads of cattle. What we can see are for the 1998 and check the values of the index. We have relative higher values for the first quartile than for the mean, and we have a relative high probability. And those values, the values of the rank reversals for the median and the first quartile increased in 2012, but the probability decreased. So when you multiply this value for the probability, it gives you the idea of the overall importance. And again, check credit. Look at the first, the median, the first quartile, and the probability. It's very high, comparable to the one in 2012. But take a look to the values of the rank reversals. Per capita income, we have something similar to this, that we have high probability and high sensitivity values. So when we aggregate overall, what we have is that the most sensitive criteria were per capita income, credit, and education of adults when we combine this result in this chart. This thing is how per capita income increase. Well, it was more important for explaining the decrease in household vulnerability in 1988 at 2012, but the role of credit and again the education of adults in the two surveys. But these changes were considered important by our colleagues. So we identify the most important criteria, that the ones that you have to review most closely between the two surveys. And these are just a synthesis of the results of the most important versus the most sensitive criteria. And when you can see that there are changes in the indicator removal test between the two surveys, and the importance and the critical indicator value tend to maintain the same ranking. Well, what are just the general conclusions? There are two important densos that our colleagues derived from this analysis. We just did the number crunching and the comparisons. The interpretations are something that Dr. Nelson, Dr. Eakin are still analyzing. Well, what we have shown is the relevance analyzing uncertainty of the magnitudes and weights of the criteria when ranking the alternatives. In this case, each household, when linear combination techniques are used to evaluate adaptive capacity and, by the way, vulnerability to climate change or food insecurity as well. These other results, what suggests is that monitoring programs of how households have improved or not through government interventions have expiration dates. I mean, the analysis, the one AHP, the results from AHP have an expiration date. What I'm trying to say and to provoke thinking is that you should always consider to reevaluate and reweight your criteria given the particular context you're living with. And of course, you can make this the comparison that we did just to understand what's going on in the community. It's maybe unwise to use an AHP model to evaluate household vulnerability that was developed for a certain date and expect to perform well or to give the similar results 20 years later. There are some things in the government interventions that change that tend to that would suggest that you have to that we don't understand. I mean, we're aggregating too much. This seems obvious, but at least we have presented some empirical evidence in this respect. And importantly, vulnerability indicators with high weights are not necessarily the most influential. Other indicators with relative weights are more influential than the ones that have the highest weight. And our approach have another applications in problems such as land suitability analysis, environmental impact assessment, socio-ecological assessment. There are a number of indices that are being developed with the use of the AHP. And I'll stop at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. Well, first of all, it's good to see you, Luis.
Enrique, good to see you too.
Good to see you. Yeah, last time we had that background, but a real background in Barcelona.
Yes.
I just have a question. Perhaps I missed something, but really what you're proposing is to analyze the real influence of the different indicators, which is different from the initial assigned weights, right? But this applies. It seems to me that this applies to any framework of indicators that have been developed. It doesn't need to be AHP necessarily. Am I right, or am I missing something?
Yes, yes. That you could extend our results to that. Of course, the important lesson is exactly that. Especially in terms of the weights, not as much in the when you mention the magnitude of this indicator, but that's another source of epistemic uncertainty that you can deal with. But the meaning of the weights is very important to consider because it has a particular context at a moment. So the thing is that what you make in the case of the difference is that in the case of the AHP is it can be a lot clearer, more evident the reason. Because you have pairwise comparisons. And perhaps with other techniques that you don't have pairwise comparisons, it tends to obscure that fact. The thing that what I'm trying to convey is that when you make a pairwise comparison, the experts are doing an evaluation of the whole context at a particular moment. And if that context changes, then the weights have to change accordingly. Yeah. And that's very clear with the AHP, and I'm not sure that because of the pairwise comparison or any technique that uses pairwise comparison in weights, I would say. But with some other techniques for doing developing indices, I'm not sure that it can be as clear as in this case, although the generalization could be the same.
Well, at the end of the day, they will still provide weights, and we can assume that those weights were, even if they were subjective, were proposed within a specific context, not just out of the blue sky. That's why probably your technique is much more general than AHP.
Yeah, you have a point. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.